Returning to the podcast is Dr. Paul Craig Roberts of paulcraigroberts.org. Get on his mailing list if you're not already. Welcome back to Geopolitics and Empire, Dr. Roberts.
Well, thank you very much. I'm pleased to see you again.
Yeah, it's been quite a while. I think our last chat was last year in June, and I just got so busy and always dealing with technical issues behind the scenes with the podcast. And I'm like, I got to get back Dr. Roberts on, and I keenly follow your mailing list. I urge people to get on there as well, and I've seen you on other podcasts, so I thought, got to get him on. And maybe starting with the fun, upbeat topic of war. Not that any of our topics will really be pleasant, but I'm agreeing with your assessments as regards the U.S., NATO, Russia war. To me, it does seem Putin is demonstrating weakness. And just yesterday or the day before, there was an assassination attempt on Shoigu. I'm not sure if you caught that. So what are your thoughts? Where are we at when it comes to the war?
Well, that is a changing question. The latest report, excuse me, is that the Russians and the Americans are working out an agreement that will get Trump and Putin back together. I don't see how they can do this unless one side or the other abandons its position. Because the positions each side holds, they can't be reconciled. Trump wants an immediate ceasefire, and then they'll worry about what to do to resolve the issue. and Putin basically wants a mutual security agreement that ends NATO as a threat to Russia. Basically, that gets NATO off Russia's borders. So for Trump, it's quickly stopping fighting, and for Putin, it's to reconcile between the Russians and the West, so that Russia no longer feels that its security is threatened. Well, how do you compromise that? So I don't understand what is going on. There have been so many attempts to get the two together, and it never produces anything. But the Russian negotiators, they keep saying, the Anchorage format still holds. It still holds. Well, how can they say that, And we still hear Putin and Lavrov saying, we're open to negotiation, we're open to negotiation. So it makes them look like they're begging. And this, of course, contributes to the sense of Russian weakness, of irresolution, of desperation, and yet they're winning on the battlefield. And even the pro-Ukrainian news sources now admit that the Ukrainian army is on the verge of collapse, and so on. So it's very difficult to make any sense out of it. And I think that getting NATO off of Russia's borders can't be done, because the military security complex is a powerful lobby, has tremendous power in the United States. In every state, there's either a military base or a military contractor. They are tremendous contributors to political campaigns. And for Trump to take away the Russian enemy that's worth so much to their profits, that's hard to see how he can do that. Particularly when Israel is continuing to pressure us to go to war with Iran. So I don't know what Putin will do when the Ukrainian army is defeated and collapsed, and he has all of the territory that he's already incorporated into Russia. This is all back under Russian control. I don't know what what he's going to do. Is he going to give an ultimatum to Kiev? Um, uh, if on his own he's going to achieve his goal of demilitarizing, denazification, the neutrality of Ukraine, he's going to have to impose it by force. and and we have some of the Europeans like Macron and France who has no public support. I think the last I saw he had 11% or 13% support. Well, he keeps talking about sending French troops and NATO forces. So will Trump be part of Europe? And when Ukraine collapses, in comes NATO to continue the fight. I have no idea what they're going to do. I don't think they know. So it's a difficult. You can't really answer it. All these years I've been fearful that Putin's non-response is very slow, never-ending war. Let the West get more and more involved, and the provocations become more and more serious, and that this thing would spin out of control and would be in a big war. Now, as far as I can see, there's a little more reluctance on the West side now to do that, but it's still there. So I just don't know.
Yeah, I'd agree with your assessment as things are changing. And just on that last point, I was going to ask you, I do see elements of the West, Washington, London, NATO. When you talk about these provocations, we saw this week, it appeared 18,000 NATO ghost ships appeared erroneously on the radars off the coast of Finland. That reminds me of 1983's Able Archer event, or you have now my own country, Croatia, Germany. They're bringing back mandatory military conscription. So it seems like the West still is preparing to use Putin's own phrase from a speech he gave maybe 10, 15 years ago, that the West is still wants to dismember the Russian bear and defang it. And, there's a lot of those Rand Corporation white papers that talk about this. So I think that would be the opening towards some World War III event. So just any thought that, I don't know if you caught that news about the 18,000 ghost ships that appeared on the radar, which the Russians could have interpreted as an attack.
Ooh, 18,000. Didn't know there were that many. I sometimes think that all of this war talk in Europe, it's an effort to hold the EU together, which I think the EU is got so many internal problems that it could break up. And so I've been thinking that perhaps they're using Russia and war as a way to keep the EU together, and that it's not really all that serious about war. It's serious about holding the EU together by dramatizing a common enemy that's a danger that they have to be united against. It may be that's all that is, and I can't really conceive of Europe being able to go to war with Russia. There's no comparability in the weapons the two sides have, even with our participation. So it looks like it's serving some other purpose than actually getting ready to fight Russia.
Yeah, and the other signs when it comes to the EU, where they're creating, bringing in the digital currency. We'll talk about that. But what was the other thing? The chat control the democracy shield. I mean, it's so Orwellian. And then the Stasi 2.0, Frau Ursula Gertrude von der Leyen, as I like to call her, just announced a new intelligence unit the EU is about to create. And I think it has to do with what you're talking about. But real quick, I know you share stuff from Gilbert Doctorow. I've had him on the podcast, and I got to get him back on. It's been too long. But he seems to have joined your ideological camp when it comes to assessing the war, and he got some recently. He got insulted by some of the ultra, what I'll call them, the pro BRICS, pro Russia, multipolar crowd attacking him. I like to call them multipolaristas, and I found it kind of strange that they don't allow for dissent. I don't know if you sort of caught that, and what do you make of some of these Western analysts who think Putin can do no wrong?
Yeah, I think that there's a handful of them, and I try to get along with them because a lot of what they say is correct, that the West has underestimated Russian capabilities, and this underestimate could come back to bite us in a bad way. And there's a risk, and thinking Russia is helpless and defeatist and all of that. And so when they stress the capability of Russia, I think they're right. I think they miss the point that I've made and that Dr. O now makes, that Putin's non-response, which is very humane, highly professional as statescraft, is producing the opposite result that he intends. Instead of convincing the West he's reasonable and can be trusted and dealt with, they say, "Oh, look, he's weak. He's getting weaker. We'll keep pressuring. Let's push harder and see what he does to this. See if he has any response this time." So the analysts that you're talking about, they're also alienated from the West, and that they see its policies as wrong, self-defeating, and in many ways they're pulling for Putin to teach the West a lesson that will cause it to rethink its position and become easier to get along with, to make an accommodation more likely. So they don't like to see any doubts thrown on Putin, because their hopes are that the West, the United States particularly, will get its comeuppance. And this will sober up the Americans from their doctrine of hegemony and unipolarism, and make them realize they have to accommodate other countries. So I don't really see the point in fighting with them, because I understand what they're doing and I approve of it. But I think Dr. O is right and they're wrong, and not seeing that Putin is undermining his position and therefore undermining the position that these analysts are supporting. Because if the West never gets its comeuppance, it continues its provocations. And the real problem is, at some point, the provocation becomes so great that Putin can't ignore it. And the longer it goes on, the more dangerous the Russian response has to be. And if it goes on long enough, the only response is nuclear. And so that's my position, and I think Dr. O sees that. And the analysts that don't see that Um, they're right about so many things, but they're wrong about that. And I don't see any point in them attacking Dr. Rowe. As far as I know, they don't attack me, and I'm the first one to make that point. In fact, Dr. Rowe used to attack me for making the point, but he's seen the light. And it seems to me all of these people are intelligent compared to print and TV media, compared to the Council on Foreign Relations. Uh, and they should discuss each other's points and not reply by dismissing them or being rude. And Dr. O is a little bit thin-skinned.
Yeah,
But
I've had on a number of these folks, and I want to talk to everyone, and I found the pattern where when I've tried to re-invite back on the podcast some of these, as I call them, multipolaristas, they tend to decline, and it's kind of, I think it has to do with what you're saying. They don't like when you're not fully on board with their view.
yeah, I think I think I explained it. I don't know if it's very clear, but I think that's the right line. So we'll just see. I mean, I I think this situation calmed down somewhat when Trump went to China, because I think he went there intending, to be so tough and give orders, and he found he was up against an iron wall. The Chinese guy told him, "Go, no." And right after the meeting, Trump was saying what good friends we were with China and how important they were, and how. So I think he ran into what he respects. That is a very strong person, and it's unfortunate that Putin hadn't taken that line. But of course, Putin was positioned in a way, and it was difficult for him to take a strong position because they were all saying he's going to reestablish the Soviet empire. And so taking a strong position fits in with the American propaganda picture of Putin. Oh, he's going to take back the Soviet empire. And so he's wanted to avoid giving any sort of excuse that he's confirming that by being so unresponsive, by turning the other cheek constantly. And as I've already said, this, I think, undermined his real purpose.
Yeah, and to your point on China, actually, for my subscribers last week, I was writing, Asia Times headlines. Even Council on Foreign Relations, Foreign Affairs are talking about effectively how the baton has been handed to China, that Russia and America now must it's this deal with this formidable Xi Jinping and China, and even Foreign Affairs now is lauding the multipolar world, which means a decreased American position. And so it seems like the winds, they're signaling that the winds are changing. And real quick, you mentioned Israel and Iran. Any thoughts? Yesterday we had MBS in the White House, and Trump declared Saudi Arabia as a major non-NATO ally, which I guess is a big deal. And so any thoughts as to which way the winds are blowing in the Middle East?
Well, I think Trump is just really under Israel's control, and he can't get out from under it. The lobby is just too strong, and the Jews control so many of our institutions, and I mean, even a very large percentage of the MAGA Americans. A lot of them are Christian Zionists, and they think that America's purpose assigned by God is to defend Israel. And that's the end of it. It doesn't matter what Israel does. And um, we see that Trump has done nothing to stop funding the genocide in Gaza. His ceasefire is not a ceasefire. The Israeli continues bombing and destroying buildings and killing people, and Trump says there's peace. So what? And I think it's very interesting if Trump is stressing that Saudi Arabia is an American ally, because, as you know, the definition of Greater Israel, which was from the Nile to the Euphrates, in the last year has been changed twice. At first, it was the Israeli ministers who said that it now includes half of Saudi Arabia. And this sent Saudi Arabia looking for some kind of alliance with Pakistan in order to get under the Pakistani nuclear umbrella against Israel. And then more recently, an Israeli minister said, well, actually, Greater Israel now includes Pakistan. So it's from the Nile through Pakistan. Well, and I think the Israelis are serious about that. And I think that what goes unmentioned in the news is that the Israelis are continuing to expand in Syria and in Lebanon. You know, they essentially wiped out the leadership of the Hezbollah militia, which had blocked them from entering Iran with those exploding cell phones. You know, this about killed the entire leadership, you know, maybe all the way down to the captain level. And so, Syria is gone. So the conduit route from Iran through Syria to Hezbollah of weapons is broken. And so I think Israeli expansion will continue, and that they will use all their means of pressuring Trump. And of course, the American Congress is fully with them. I mean, who in the entire Congress isn't lined up with Israel other than Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, both of whom now have been denounced by Trump? Now, these were his two strongest supporters. He's turned on them because they've criticized Israel. So, and you look at education, the um, administrations of the universities, they don't let the students protest against Israel. So Israel can control the university's response to them. It controls the media's response to them. It controls the Congress response to them, Trump's response to them, state and local government's response to them. I mean, you're aware that there are states such as Texas and Florida, in which if you are a businessman and you want to do business with the state, you know, to have a state contract, or you want to have a job with the state and you've criticized Israel, you're out. It's prohibited. There's actually a law that if you in any way like participate in a boycott, you can't have a state contract, you can't work for the state government. So when you look at this type of power, this reach that they have, they've shown their ability to block tenure, to withdraw tenure. Remember what happened to the Jewish scholar Norman Finkelstein. The university, a Catholic university, voted him tenure. And the Israel lobby was able to reach into the university and squash it. And now he's unemployed. And remember I think it was a Palestinian. He had tenure at the University of Virginia. he was hired by University of Illinois, I think. Given tenure, hired, resigned his tenure, Virginia, moved to Illinois, only to find that Israel had reached into the office of the president and the trustees of the University of Illinois and canceled his tenure. He now drives a school bus. So when you see this kinds of power, how can Trump escape it? Look who he's indebted to. The Adelson woman, Larry Ellison. Huge sums of money they've given to finance his campaign and whatever else. How does he get free of this? How can he offend these people? And they've already had him attack Iran. This is an act of war. It wasn't declared by Congress. He did it on his own. So my view of that is it's not Israel subject to Trump's influence, it's Trump subject to Netanyahu's. And we recently saw Trump getting into the Israeli judicial system. You know, Netanyahu is arraigned and on trial for criminal offenses by his own government. And the trial can't go anywhere because the war is off and on. When the war goes on, the trial stops. When the war goes off, it renews. So he has a very good incentive to keep war going. Well, Trump stepped into this and wrote to the president of Israel, which is a ceremonial office, but he has pardon power, and asked him to pardon Netanyahu before there's a trial, not after he's convicted, but now. Don't risk a conviction. Well, that tells me that Netanyahu and Trump don't expect the trial to exonerate Netanyahu, or they wouldn't do this. So that shows who the boss is. It's not Trump.
And just to add on the Middle East, I thought, I mean, to see al-Jolani, Shara, whatever his name is, the former Al-Qaeda head of Syria, now president, in the White House was quite Orwellian. You know, I remember years ago, a student of mine, an American student of mine in Mexico, the parents sent a letter to my director saying, I was this anti-American conspiracy theorist for stating that the U.S. and the West support Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And here we are, Al-Qaeda in the White House. And I wanted to get your thought on as well in Latin America, you know, in Mexico. I'm actually, I think I'm going to prepare a solo episode analyzing what recently happened in Mexico, but they're going after, they're talking about Maduro, Venezuela, the warships are circling. And it's just a repeat, like to say that he's I read yesterday, they're saying Maduro is the head of this cartel. I'm like, there's mainstream American news reports going back decades saying how the CIA was running drugs for that same, I believe, cartel. So it's rubbish. Not to say I'm not a fan of Maduro or Venezuela, but again, it's more of the same regime change. And Cuba is looking weak, like it's going to fall. And I've been saying for the past year specifically, I know people going to Cuba, it's becoming increasingly destitute, more so than in past years. And just hearing on the ground reports that made me think like Cuba is about to fall because they don't have electricity, water, food, nothing. They're completely destitute. And then Foreign Policy did a piece the other week saying how Cuba's fate is tied to Venezuela's because of the support from oil that Cuba gets from Venezuela. And then now we have Mexico, these events recently, the protests, which I would wage are 80-90% organic, but we are seeing color revolution interference as well in Mexico. And so what are your thoughts when it comes to Monroe Doctrine 2.0, the America's backyard?
Well, remember when Trump was first inaugurated this term, he talked about incorporating Canada and Mexico into the United States. He did. And maybe it's his idea we'll be as big as Russia and China that way. And but I agree with you that there's no evidence that Maduro is a narco-terrorist. This is a term they've created, just like they've demonized everyone else they've overthrown. They create some term to apply to them, and no one ever examines the term, but the term tells ordinary people they're bad guys, and so it's okay if we get rid of them. So that's the use of this term. I don't know of any evidence that any of these boats had drugs because they don't stop them and search them and say, hey, here's the drugs. They just blow them up, kill everybody. Boat sinks. So the president of Colombia has said that this is unlawful and murder, and he's right. And this is the country behaving badly is the United States, not Venezuela.
Even the UN. I read your report from the UN this week, where UN expert again. I'm not a fan of the UN, but the UN is coming out and saying what you're describing is are international crimes according to international law.
But that's right, but it has no effect. The reports from the UN, they never have an effect because they don't suit the main power that's running the show and paying the bills. And it's just like the findings against Israel and Gaza, they have no effect. The policies continue. We had the other day an Israeli minister in the government currently declare there's no such thing as Palestinian people. So if they don't exist, how can you genocide them? And so there's no Palestine, and yet the last I heard from Putin, he was talking about the two-state solution. And I hear Israel is sending military weapons to Ukraine. And yet Putin is very protective of Israel. It's almost like, it's like every leadership of every country has a hard time operating in reality. They're operating in a fake world, and they create a reality that doesn't relate to real reality. And you see this even the way they discuss issues. The discussions don't relate to reality. And when you get confused between reality and non-reality, you don't make good decisions. Where do we see good decisions made? No. Oh, well, what? The Chinese leader just told Trump, no. Trump said, yes, sir. You see, this is a mystery to me. Why did anybody in Washington think we had any leverage over China? They hold all the cards, all of them. We don't have a single card. If they turn off the rare earths, American industry shuts down. What happens to NVIDIA? Making these chips that cost tens of thousands of dollars a piece. They haven't got any rare earths. How are they going to make the chips? What's going to sustain their, 4.6 trillion capitalization? So how can you think you got leverage over China when they've got all the cards? Where's American industries in China? Apple, all the rest of them, they're in China. What if China says, well, we've nationalized them? Oh, no, we're not paying.
I mean, the West was it in North Europe. I forget who it was, Denmark or someone who Nexperia. They nationalized the Chinese chip manufacturer, and now they've reversed. They said, okay, we will nationalize it if you give us access to some of those chips, semiconductors. So that proves your point that, yeah.
Yeah, it's, you know, I don't understand, during the period that the Wolfowitz doctrine ruled, that is American hegemony. He declared this, I think, in 1991. Well, that was the beginning of the offshoring of American manufacturing. So now look at the contradiction. You are asserting your hegemony over the world just as you're moving all your manufacturing to China. This is loony stuff. I mean, this is loony. I mean, really? And nobody could see this. Not even the neoconservatives. And Jews are supposed to be smart people. Oh, they're asserting our hegemony over the world, and they're supporting globalism, and all American industry moves to China. And you remember, they used to say, oh, it'll be 50 years before we have to worry about China. That's what they were saying 30 years ago. 5 years. China's, why? We gave them the technology, the business know-how, trained workforce. Yes. I mean,
And that brings me sort of to my next question, the economy. And we've seen Trump recently talk about 50-year mortgages and 15-year car loans. And that's you will own nothing, because if you have a 50-year mortgage, the average now American age for their first home purchase, I read, was like 40 years old. So if you're 40, by the time you're 90, I mean, and the average death rate for life expectancy for an American is male, I think, 78. So you'll die never owning your own home. Meanwhile, here I am in Mexico, and it took me 6 years to pay off my my house. But and then you've got this play, and you mentioned Larry Ellison. Financial Times yesterday reported that Oracle's $300 billion open AI deal is now valued at minus 74 billion. So, yeah, and you just published, is AI overheating? You just published that recently, and so AI might be the bubble that pinpricks the other super bubble. And so your sort of thoughts on all this, the economy, and then Trump's plans to back, I call it a Bretton Woods 3.0. We went from gold backed dollar to petrodollar, and they've run out of runway, and they're trying to extend the Ponzi a third time, backing the dollar with Bitcoin and stable coins, which will create demand for treasuries. But the danger for me there is, I've talked about this before, the digital revolution that you talk about. And I love your pieces on the digital revolution, your missives, because I laugh, I cry. It's therapy. But I think you're 100% right. The danger is they build out this digital architecture that becomes the digital prison. So there's a number of things in there, but your thoughts on the economy and then the moves to sort of digitize it.
Well, first of all, I think the reason they're talking about a 50-year mortgage is so younger people can afford it. The whole purpose of having 50 years is it drops the payments down lower. So the monthly payment is lower. Of course, you end up paying for the house 3 times instead of twice. Or 4 times if you count the taxes and the insurance and all the rest. So that's the purpose. It's more and more difficult for Americans to get a house. They have to be older and older and earning more or whatever. And so we can save the housing market by giving longer term mortgages. And the same for cars. All the subprime car loan lenders are now in trouble. I think one of them collapsed last week or something. And so if you can stretch out the car loan, then your monthly payment drops. So they're trying to adjust the cost of transportation and housing to the low level of American incomes that are being eaten up by inflation. So that's what that is. It's a sign of a deteriorating economy, and they're trying to make these adjustments to keep some life in it. Now, the AI thing, it's dangerous primarily, as you said, it's creating a digital prison in which whoever controls the database controls the truth. And there won't be any way to challenge that truth because you'll simply be cut off or censored or blocked, or which has been happening for some years already. And in social media, in payment systems like PayPal and in other ways. So, but economically, you're right. AI may be in trouble because the rate of change is so rapid, and there's so much investment into AI. I mean, just think about NVIDIA having a 4.6 trillion capitalization. I mean, so you've got massive investments that are rapidly depreciating. I don't know what the current expected life of these processors, for example, these AI processors, but they seem to be 3 years. So you've got massive depreciation, and the profits don't cover the depreciation. So the whole system is based on the inflow of new investments. And to keep up, you're always having to make new investments to take the place of the ones that are depreciated. So it looks like a tsunami of depreciation is building against all these companies. And sooner or later, somebody is going to say, why are we putting all these huge sums of investment? There's no profits. You see, a company can have profits and no cash flow because the profits don't include the new investment necessary to keep the company in existence. And when you include that, then you got profits and no cash flow. And so you're totally dependent on new investments coming in. And you're facing up front a huge reinvestment need. And if the new investment isn't sufficient to make that, well, it pops. And the rapidity of change it's just very fast. They had until recently they had what they call CPU processors. Now they processed in sequence, and then they came up with GPUs. Well, they process in parallel, simultaneously, so they're much quicker. So that whole investment in CPUs wiped out. Well, it had to be replaced. Well, you can see the depreciation cost and what that does to the company's cash flows position. So you have it where these companies are totally dependent on your investment. Otherwise, they can't cover the depreciation. And I think that's the reason Michael Burry of The Great Short fame has waved a red flag. I think he says that there's not going to be enough investment capital to cover the depreciation in this industry. I think that's what the problem is, because We've seen a couple of companies sell NVIDIA's shares.
Peter Thiel, I think, did recently.
Yeah, and also OpenAI sold 4.6 billion of the shares. And Bloomberg says, oh, this is an indication people are pulling back from AI investment. I don't know if that's true or not because OpenAI, I think it was OpenAI that sold the 4.6 billion. They said we're using it to invest elsewhere or something, or it was something of a reassignment of assets within AI, not a withdrawal from AI. That was the explanation given. But we have seen, Amazon is in all this too. And people think of it as an online marketer, but it's in everything to a much greater extent. And they now, seeing this depreciation problem, are laying off people to try to save the money to be able to deal with this depreciation tsunami. They've just laid off 14,000 people. And they're moving into robotics to replace, they say, it will save 600,000 jobs for them in packaging and mailing and sorting packages. And uh, all the humans disappear, and it's run by a robot. And so when you go the next step and you look at the impact of AI on displacing people who already can't afford the car payment and the mortgage, what are they going to do? What are these people going to do? And I'm still answering your question. And remember what Elon Musk said about AI. He says the digital revolution is what brings us communism. Why? He said, because people have no jobs and they've got no way to buy the goods and services that the digital revolution and AI are producing. So either they have to be exterminated, in which case, what's the purpose of the goods and services that is being produced? Or they have to have a guaranteed, a universal income. So that he said it means the means of production have to be socialized. There be no private property. This is the ultimate implication of the digital revolution, is communism. Because there's no private property, because the earnings of the companies have to be distributed to the non-working population so they have a means of existing, of purchasing the goods and services of the digital revolution. So I can't see any way out of that circle. I think Musk is right. And so what is the ultimate outcome, you ask, of the economy? Well, we're marching into uh, communism, where people get checks. We already have 42 million Americans living like that. These are the Americans on the SNAP that the whole government shutdown was about. They get their food paid, their rent paid, their medical services paid. They're 42 million Americans. That's 1 in 8 American, and it's like 1 in 3 or 4 of the workforce. Because the workforce is only 170 million, including unemployed. And yet you got 43 million living off the income of the 170 million. Well, that's what, 1 in 4. So we've already got 1 foot in communism. And Musk says digital revolution, AI, puts both feet. And so, as I said, Um, you got a whole bunch of unemployed people and no market for the goods and services. So the only solution is you nationalize the means of production, divide up the profits and checks to people, and they buy whatever the means of production produce. And I remember years and years ago, it may have been the 1950s, I'm kind of old, Mad comic. Do you ever remember Mad comics?
Oh, as a kid, yeah, I actually bought some of them. They had the spy versus spy section as well, I think. Yeah.
They had a society that was run like this. Everything, nobody had to do anything, and nobody needed to know anything, and nobody knew how to fix the system one day when it broke, and everyone perished.
There was a video clip. No, I saw that recently. I'm not sure, but that was my next question. So, do you think this digital communist system, it doesn't sound very sustainable? At some point, I think it would break, or what do you think?
I don't know. I don't. I think it's inherent in the digital revolution and can't be avoided. Now, you know, the Mad comics. Now, this was maybe maybe three-quarters of a century ago. Somebody saw the future. Now, what do we know already of the impact on education of the digital revolution of AI? Kids don't need to know anything, nothing. They don't need to know anything. This started out before we had AI. They didn't need to write cursive because they had keyboards. So you got a whole bunch of graduates out there that cannot write cursive. They didn't need to know the multiplication tables because they had calculators. Well, now they don't need to know anything. If they have to write a term paper, they just ask AI. AI writes it. They don't have to know anything. They don't have to have read any books, absorbed any knowledge, organized it in some way to explain some phenomena. It's all done for them. They don't have to know any math. They don't have to, they can just ask AI. And so they're not educated. They don't know. All they know how to do is ask AI. Well, this is not, why go to school? What can you learn at school? And why learn it? So, it's now widely reported that the kids do their work by asking AI. And so they're not learning. And I'm now hearing that professors grade the work using AI. But it's not the kid's work. The kid hadn't done anything. He's asked AI, AI did it. Well, so yes, it can collapse because just like in the Mad comics, nobody knows how to do anything. If something goes wrong, what do? There's no AI to ask. It broke down. And we know digital systems have all kinds of glitches. I mean, I suffer them continuously. I think most people do.
I was giving an example the other day. Like if I just summarize my last month, because what you describe in your digital revolution missives, part of it is like the movie Brazil, 1985, Terry Gilliam, where it just doesn't function. So it's just error after error, and then the other danger is, as you say, when it does function, it's used by them to control us, and just like I Amazon. So I hadn't bought something in Amazon for a long time. I went a few days ago. I make my order. My order is immediately canceled, erased, and my account suspended. I ordered pizza from Domino's. He forgets the second pizza, and then when he comes back a half hour later, it's the wrong pizza. My internet goes out every month for a number of days, and then it's a joke. You call them, they don't answer. They don't want to answer. But anyways, I'm just using these examples of how
Yeah.
dysfunctional.
Well, ever since the digital revolution, I've wasted enormous amounts of time dealing with service providers. You can't get one. You have to fight the robot. You finally get one. It's a low-level person that can barely speak English and can't do anything. And so, if you ever get through to them, one, by waiting, and two, by explaining over and over, then you wait while they look for a higher up to take the call. And sometimes the higher up can't do anything. And so that's one problem. I mean, what used to you could resolve in a 3-minute phone call, it could take 3 hours or 3 days, or go on longer. Um, uh, you run into all kinds of problems that really don't make any sense, particularly security. If you notice, the security requirements get higher and higher and higher. You can no longer just have a username and a password. Then you got to have a text message or email message with a code. And then sometimes they'll make you answer questions, your mother's maiden name, and all this kinds of stuff. And it's billing, and they're always trying to get you to add another layer for your own protection. And first of all, they try, and then they impose it. Well, the other day, and now we have a situation where companies are warning you in advance of all the ways the security can be breached. And I got a message the other day that they can they can intercept anything, and not only that, they can mimic your voice. They can mimic a video of you or of a customer rep. And I got to thinking, oh, they can mimic my voice. Well, Wells Fargo, as a security measure, uses your voice. So what's that security measure worth? Nothing. Wells Fargo is something like this. My voice is my identity. Please verify my identity. And if they recognize your voice, then they let you in to your account. Well, if anybody can mimic my voice, this is no longer a security. And the rate of change in security is so high that it becomes incompatible with other people's security. And you reach a situation where the system doesn't function. It doesn't function for you. You then have to think about changing your service provider or changing something, your browser, or you look and search. What can I change so that they connect again? Well, the time spent doing this is highly unproductive. So I'm not at all sure that the digital revolution contributes to productivity. Certainly, I can't say that it contributes to mine. The whole analog system, we were safe. It worked. It was plenty good. It didn't threaten our privacy, didn't threaten our security. We didn't have to worry who's got my credit card and how many debts are they running up tonight while I'm asleep, or who's just stole my pension account. Why is my bank closed down? Why is my account closed on the bank? Yeah. And that happens to you. Oh boy. Things can happen now. You have to go to a bank office with an appointment to deal with them. So I think the system will break down, and I think it's beginning to break down just because it can't handle all the use. The use of it grows so much, so heavy. How many billions of people have got a cell phone that's scrolling all day long, going to this side, that side, this constant. I mean, it's I don't know. It's massive. Sometimes even Elon Musk's Starlink It doesn't exactly go down, but it just the bandwidth or whatever just drops, and some things just won't open, and then it passes. You don't know what's going on. Your cell phone. If somebody wants to text me a code, it comes in 3 days later.
It's exactly. I mean, it's exactly what you said. When the Domino's failed last time, I'm like, I'm ordering from another pizza place. When my ISP was causing, I have a Starlink, so it's a plan B. But I'm like, But the problem is sometimes like the ISP I have is the only fiber optic provider where I live, so I could switch to Starlink. But yeah, you have to look for other solutions. And you shared a great piece from Peter Koenig, Global Research, and then you said you got a note from him where he says analog is the solution, and I fully agree. Like in the neighborhood where I live now, they want it hasn't been decided yet, but they want us all. They want to impose a digital app for us all to use for the entrance into the and just as you explained, I'm like, wait a minute, if someone comes to visit me, the security guard gives me a call and I'm like, yeah, let him in, we're done, the analog. Now they want me to generate, my friend comes, I have to generate a QR code, get on the app, generate the QR code, send it to my friend has to receive it, then show, it's absolutely absurd. But what Koenig said was analog. I think we have to try to remain analog and go back to analog. No.
Yeah, I think I've written several times that I thought, except for nuclear weapons, the digital revolution was the greatest blunder humanity ever made. And it's presented as this great rescuer and this wonderful thing. It's a deadly blunder. Um, it may not be as bad as nuclear weapons, because if they go off, you don't have to worry about the digital revolution. But it's a huge, terrible mistake. And it was made by people all full of themselves. We're all so smart, and we're going to make all this money, and nobody can understand the obvious consequences: the destruction of privacy, destruction of independence, the isolation of people. I mean, in fact, they've already destroyed the telephone. Who answers the telephone? I don't even have a answering service, because it fills up with endless junk. And uh, so they don't answer the phone, so they use text. Well, now if they can invade the text, then you're destroying communication between people. We're going to go back to smoke signals and carrier pigeons, you know, or mail. The trouble with the mail is all the DEI hiring, the crooks that know how to wash a check and change who it's written to and the amount. They pay bribes to people who pick up mail on rural routes if they see something might be a check, or who deliver the mail. They see something might be a check, to let a few of them disappear and they get in their hands. So even the mail service is corrupted by the digital revolution, because they can wash the checks. And it's why you would create so many problems and the employment problems that come from it. It doesn't create jobs. And these data centers, they're building everywhere. They run up people's electric bills. They use tremendous water, I think, for cooling. And we already have challenged water resources. All kinds of cities have difficulties with water. Alabama, Georgia, and Florida are in permanent lawsuits over the waters of the Apalachicola River. And the river has been, its flow has been stopped. Atlanta won't release the water from the dams because they need the water. The farmers' agricultural chemicals run off into the water. They destroyed all the Apalachicola oyster beds. It, it just is sort of an endless gobbling up of resources. People can't make their mortgage payments, their car payments, and so now their electric bill doubles or triples. The water bill goes up 4 times. But what is all of these are external costs that the digital revolution is avoiding, imposing it on people. That's probably the only reason they're profitable.
And I want to drive this point home, and it's what I've been banging on about the past 5 years. I mean, what you just called the digital communism, the digital neo-feudalism. I had Edwin Black on 5 years ago. He calls it the algorithm ghetto, comparing it to the physical ghettos. The Jews were put in 15-minute cities, electronic concentration camps. And what we said earlier, I think at some point that system fails because it's just not sustainable. But in the near term, we're in the first phase of it's being set up, the camp, right? And I think it's going to be very painful because now they're linking the hate speech laws, thought crime, Ministry of Truth. So if you say something wrong, your bank account is disabled. You can't renew your driver's license, your passport. You can't buy a public transport ticket. And so you're effectively you can't leave your house only by walking. Maybe at some point they'll have drones or checkpoints that using geolocation. You can't, if you go outside your zone, but your payment system won't work. And so just any final thought on that, because I think I find that even more threatening than war, because every country is installing this system now, and you have to ask permission for any life activity from this digital system.
I want to see the end of human autonomy. Humans, and they won't even be able to think or not accurately, because they won't have any accurate facts. The facts will be created to support the narratives. And it's the only information you'll have. And whoever controls the database for AI controls truth, or what will be recognized as the truth. And the real truth will be lost and gone forever. It'll be in the memory hole and can't get out. So when it fails, what happens? Well, I guess you've got chaos. If it lasts very long, you'll have a totally uneducated, ignorant population that doesn't know how to do anything. And if it lasts very long in the communist phase, then they're not used to doing anything. It's not clear what all these unemployed people are going to do. They've got their needs met, but what are they going to do? And we'll have Roman circuses, I guess.
The running man.
Yeah. So it looks to me like you just have a collapse of civilization. And if the system breaks and it was responsible for producing everything and nobody knows how to produce anything, then they're all going to die. So I can't see any hopeful aspect in the digital revolution, because the implications are obvious and people should have seen them in the beginning. And just because we can produce deadly pathogens doesn't mean we should do it. And I see the digital revolution as a deadly pathogen. It's only a matter of time before it destroys civilization and human life. That's my view of it. And
well, given all of the the fun, pleasant topics we've been discussing, thoughts on the way forward. Obviously, pushing for diplomacy when it comes to the war aspect, but the economy, as we described, it seems like nothing we can do to stop that. It's going off the cliff, and so we have to sort of bat down the hatches, all of us individually, and I guess prepare as best we can. And as you mentioned, shared Peter's article, going analog. So all I can think about is trying to get as analog as possible, trying to get as far removed from the coming train, removing myself further from urban areas. So any sort of closing thoughts, advice for people.
That's a question to ask preppers. Preppers have been prepping long before the artificial intelligence, because they saw you couldn't trust the system. So they want to be prepared to generate their own power, grow their own food, and have their own self-defense. And so they work at that. So that means you need land. You need water. You need to know how to raise crops, how to store them or preserve them. You need to know how to use weapons. These skills used to be widespread, but civilization eliminates them. And hardly anybody. I mean, how do people get their food now? They don't get it farming. They go to the supermarket and buy it. And so, but I don't think very much of the world can survive as preppers. And furthermore, if things really get bad, the preppers will be under attack. People will be saying they've got something, let's go get it. And so they eliminate another producer, small producer, and there's nowhere to go get it next time. And I don't know. I don't know. I kind of think there's so many traps that humanity has set for itself, particularly the nuclear weapons. We really don't know what might come out of all these American bio warfare labs that are spread everywhere. We did get the COVID virus out of it. It wasn't as deadly as they intended, I think. We don't know what can come out of that. We don't know if all of these World Economic Forum programs of reducing the world population to 500 million, you'll own nothing and be happy. All of this, in a way, seems to recognize the implications of the digital revolution. And so they're trying to prepare humanity by by getting rid of most of us, and by getting us used to the idea there's no longer any such thing as private property. You won't own anything and you'll be happy. And so, whereas I say people don't recognize the implications, it looks like the World Economic Forum, what was that guy's name before he had to step down? Klaus Schwab. He seemed to understand what was going to come out of all of this. And it's possible, I guess, that the security cost of keeping the digital system gets so high and the security is so impossible that they have to drop it just because it's so dysfunctional. That's possible. And it's also possible that the glitches in the system get so pervasive that it's dysfunctional and you can't rely on it, and it has to be dropped. So it could be that the faults in the system itself will save us from the ultimate conclusion, because it just won't be able to get that far before it breaks down. And that's a hopeful idea. And every time I get frustrated that I've wasted another day dealing with the failures, I say, well, maybe it's a good thing. I hope billions of people are experiencing this too. So maybe that. as for diplomacy, the Americans in the West don't practice it. I don't think they know how. When you have a doctrine of hegemony, you don't need to be a diplomat. You give orders. Do this or you're sanctioned. Do this or we'll bomb you. You may remember the famous order that one of the neoconservatives, I think back in the George W. Bush period, gave, I think, to Pakistan. Do as you're told or we'll bomb you into the Stone Age. Well, if that's your diplomacy, you're not going to make any agreements. And that's been our position with Trump's position. Give me the ceasefire. I'm going to put worse sanctions. This is what he says. And, we can do worse things to them. So it's all a threat. It's a threat. Well, militarily, I don't think the United States is a match for Russia. We don't have any of these super atomic weapons they got, It's stupid. It's kind of like me running up to Mike Tyson and insulting him. What good does it do? Gets me flattened. And sooner or later, that'll be a Russian response. So it's just so many pitfalls there are. And you can't, the whole, and you never know when they'll use something they concoct to get rid of you, because they can concoct any evidence they want. And so a trial is meaningless. Not that many people go to trial because it's so dangerous. So they enter plea bargains. They make a deal. The prosecutor says, give me a plea bargain. I don't have to go to trial. Saves me a lot of time. The more plea bargains I get, the better my conviction rate. Make a plea bargain and I'll cut your sentence in half. Well, 97% of all felony cases in the United States are settled by self-incrimination, which is against the Constitution. So it's just, the world is fallen apart since the 20th century. It's been a gradual falling apart process. And it's not recognized, it's not discussed, and it will continue falling apart now with the AI development, probably at a more rapid rate. And so if we're lucky, it'll fail before it goes too far.
Yeah, and then when you mentioned judges, they want AI judges, so no more human thinking. And imagine, as everything we were talking, if they can't get my pizza order right, imagine when it comes to someone's life. I don't want to be in that position. And I've been joking as of late. I pray for a Category 5 solar storm, which sort of solve all of this. But either way you cut it, you're alluding to a bit of a Mad Max world, and in some ways, I'd prefer that than living in this digital communism, as you call it. And so, I guess going forward, we'll stay tuned to your email list and look to you for updates. Where are the best places to go? And I guess you'll keep on keeping on with your website and email list. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep doing it as long as I'm sentient. Keep in mind that when they have you in a digital prison, you are essentially exterminated, because you no longer have any accurate information to think, and you no longer know how to think. And there's no way for you to think. You're just told. And this is the extermination of humanity. That's what it is. And so even though you may be physically alive, you're no longer a human, because you have no independent mind. No, you have no connection to reality. You live in a false reality created by AI, and that is extermination.
I would, and we're already beginning to see that with a lot of the populists who have just delegated everything to the apps, and it becomes like you and I having this conversation, trying to have it with a lot of them. They look at you like you're
Yeah,
crazy. So, like my neighbors who want to impose. I told my wife when COVID 1984 happened. I said back then in 2020, early on, this is all about global algocracy, bringing in this global rule by algorithm. I specifically said that, and I told her, watch. In the near future, in our community, they're going to want to install facial recognition at the entrance, biometric fingerprints, QR codes. And 5 years later, I predicted it. Here they are now trying to do that. And
yeah.
the fellow lemmings around me, um, when you try to bring this up, like, what about privacy? What about my data? That this app, I don't know who the developer of this app is going to have all my data. What about freedom? And they look at you with this blank, glazed over stare, like it's
Yeah,
just.
before long, freedom will be a word that doesn't mean anything to them. I don't know what it means. Well, what is that? That's racism or something. It'll disappear. There are a lot of words I've noticed just from reading British mystery novels in the 20s and 30s. The vocabulary there is just about disappeared. A lot of the words an American today wouldn't recognize, they wouldn't know what they mean. Because human sentiments have also changed so much. They won't understand the behavior of the characters. You can, there's huge changes in the last 100 years. And uh, so the notion of privacy, freedom, truth, they all disappear. Truth's been under attack a long time. Karl Marx said truth is what serves the interests of the ruling class. Well, that's what we see today, isn't it? Yeah, it's whatever serves the powerful agendas. And this is why they were shutting down all the people on social media and firing people from print and TV media like Tucker Carlson, and because you're not allowed to present a lie with the truth, and people just get used to it. And each generation is born into a system where there's a little less freedom, a little less individual autonomy, a little less privacy. To them, this is normal. They don't know what's been lost. They weren't born back there, they haven't watched. And so they don't see the things you see as being important. It's normal. Oh yeah, you can't get in without your thumb, or it's just normal. And uh, it gets. This is how you lose freedom. Each generation knows a little less. It's not such a major change, and the previous generations have seen these little encroachments, and over time, it's a huge amount. And so the successive generations are less aware of freedom. They experience it less and less and less. This is true in every aspect. Like when I was a kid, once you knew how to ride a bicycle, you were free and gone. Today, they arrest your parents for child neglect, put you in an orphanage or child protective service center. The kind of freedom I grew up with in Atlanta, Georgia, does not exist. No kids. I think what did you have to be a certain age? I don't know, 15, 16, something. Um, I walked to school, 5 years old, and back. Today, parents would be arrested for child endangerment. So
I mean, just the other day, I mean, when I go to quote to be safe here, discipline my children, my wife is like, be careful. The neighbors can, because this is now like a law here in Mexico. The neighbors can call the authorities on us. I mean, even in Mexico now, and technically have if things are become misinterpreted. But it's like I grew up with my father. I mean, he would say, pick a tree branch or use his belt, and I'd be whacked on my behind. And I'm actually thankful that he did that because there were times where I did stupid things, like and then that I deserved it, and that helped me understand right from wrong. And now for them to take this away, you know,
arrested, yeah, child abuse. Yeah, discipline is on the border of child abuse. You really can't even raise your voice. But anyhow, these are just examples of how things over time, and you get a generation before long, they don't know what freedom is, or they've been told it's racism, or it's a tool of white supremacy, or something that becomes not only they don't know it, it's discredited. You're not even supposed to talk about it. This is the way things go. And they rewrite histories, they take down monuments, and they confirm news to the ruling narratives. So there's so much we don't that never even gets reported. We never, in the United States, we don't have any idea what's going on in Croatia. You don't hear anything. You don't hear anything about Italy, and you barely hear anything about Germany or France or England. The rest of the countries, you don't hear anything. I mean, we know nothing about what's going on in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Mongolia, Africa, or South America, except that, Maduro is a narco-terrorist. That's what we know at the moment. And I figure if they can invade Venezuela because of drug gangs, they can invade Mexico. Yeah.
yeah, that's my conclusion. Actually, last week again in my report, I was alluding to what you're saying. They've siloed everything off, where you can't get, you can't, Iranian press TV has effectively been banned in the US. Russia Today, I have to use VPNs to hop around, and now they're coming after VPNs. I mean, I was reading the states of Michigan, Wisconsin are now talking about banning VPNs China style. UK is. And so everyone will only be subject to the propaganda of their own government. And this is why I went and reread 1984 this summer, which lays that all out. Memory holding, dumbing down language. Was it a plan or a prophecy or both? Well, I guess we'll leave it there. PaulCraigRoberts.org is the website for people who haven't bookmarked it or signed up to the list. And I guess, Dr. Roberts, I'll see you in the algorithm ghetto. May the odds ever be in your favor, as they say in Hunger Games.
Hey, I love talking to you. You're a very clever guy and paying attention to what's going on. That's rare. Call me again sometime. It's a relief to talk to somebody who's intelligent.